Weekly Spooky is brought to you by our generous supporters on Patreon. Get access to exclusive podcasts, videos, and more for as little as $1 a month when you go to WeeklySpooky.com and click on the Patreon link. Your support has gotten us to 100 episodes, so join up today and help us create another 100 and beyond. Head over to WeeklySpooky.com and join the Patreon. Hello friends, if this is your first time listening to Weekly Spooky, this is not an average episode. This is our 100th episode celebration, which features 10 stories from 10 different authors broken into 2 episodes. So if you want to see what Weekly Spooky is like week in and week out, please check out a different episode. But otherwise, please kick back and enjoy our celebration. Thank you so much for helping us reach 100 episodes.
This is Weekly Spooky. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for a weak at heart, but who merely listens to warnings anyway. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way.
Well, it's been a week. I think that's enough rest for you wicked weirdos. For those just joining us, this is the second part of the 100th episode special, a special where I'm going to share a little bit of my family history with you all. So, if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, you may want to get on that. All right, let's crack that spine once again and dive ass over tea kettle back into the terror tome that is my fearsome family album. Yes. Here's the account of the time the old twins of evil of the family bore witness to a night of childhood wonder gone so very, very far off the rails. Let's call this one Magic Manor. Why me? Marcy pondered as she watched her younger foster sister Danny fiddle with a golden decoder ring. The ring was part of some big contest for a show Danny watched religiously, Magic Manor. Marcy had been forced to watch a few episodes with her sister, and by the time the sing-along came on, jumping out of the window seemed fairly reasonable. Although watching an episode of Magic Manor seemed preferable to spending any more time on this gaudy bus. The thing looked like it was decorated by a dollar store Halloween sale. Looking around the bus, Marcy wondered if she shared the long-suffering look plastered across some of the other chaperones' faces. "I'm sorry," Danny said, looking up from the decoder ring. "For what?" "You have to miss out on break." "Well," Marcy managed a weary smile, "I didn't have any plans." "You hate me, I know," Danny shrugged. I don't." Which was the truth. Marcy didn't hate Danny. Rather, she felt usurped by Danny's presence in the Walker household. Danny was a good kid, but Marcy couldn't help but feel like she was getting replaced. Gasps of awe traveled through the bus. Ahead on the horizon, an endless countryside of grass and trees gave way to a sprawling, vine-encrusted manor sitting at the center of 4 high stone walls. A woman at the front of the bus stood. "As you can see, we're very close now," she said. The large gates of the estate opened, welcoming them in. The bus made its way down a stone driveway past a hedge maze toward the looming manor. They were ushered out in pairs. Marcy took her sister's hand, worried Danny might run off to gawk at something. A gong sounded, quieting the murmuring crowd. The large double doors of the manor creaked open, and a man in a crisp dark blue suit walked down the front steps. Danny tugged on Marcy's arm. "That's Mr. Diabli," she whispered. "He sees to the running of the manor." "Welcome, one and all," he bowed. "We are honored by your presence at our humble home." "Oh, please," Marcy whispered. "Yes," a woman spoke. "We are most honored." "Most honored," another woman added. Twin sisters stood framed in the doorway. "Come into our home," Angelica beckoned. "Of your own free will." Angelica's mirror image Bella smiled. The group followed the sisters and Diabli up the stone steps into the manor. Mr. Diabli spoke. "The gold decoder ring each of you wear, which was sent to you upon winning the contest, along with clues scattered about the manor, are a puzzle. A puzzle, if solved, will net the lucky winner and their family a portion of our little family fortune." There was an audible murmur through the group. "All the marked rooms have at least one clue. They can be solved in any order you please," he continued. "Before we begin, there are sensitive, secret things here. I must ask you to turn over your cell phones." He held out a red plastic container. "Not to worry, they'll be returned at day's end." One by one, everybody deposited their phones into the plastic container. "Thank you," he said. "There's just one other thing. Please stick to the marked rooms. The roped-off rooms are off limits. Thank you." "Now," Bella said, raising her arms, "let the hunt begin." There was a sudden rush as the others pushed past Marcy. She felt Danny tugging on her hand. "This way!" was all she heard before Danny took off out of the room. Marcy followed after the girl, catching up with her in what appeared to be a study. A big fireplace sat behind an ancient-looking and outlandishly huge wooden desk. Marcy took a moment to admire the room as Danny did her thing. A boy pushed past her. "Jimmy," his mother scolded. She looked at Marcy. "Sorry, he's very enthusiastic." "Yeah." "You're—" She paused, looking for the right word. Marcy saved her the trouble. "She's my sister." "Ah, she's really good at these puzzles." "She is," Marcy said, admiration in her voice. "I just need one more." Marcy turned to see the girl jumping up and down in triumph. Danny came bounding towards her past Jimmy, only to fall flat on her face. Jimmy laughed. "Come on, Mom." He grabbed his mother's arm, pulling her out of the room. Marcy knelt down by her sister. "You okay?" "My ring broke." Through tears, the girl looked up at her. "He tripped me." "Come on, kid." Marcy helped Danny up. "He's an asswipe. World's full of 'em." From one of the other rooms came a roar of triumph. "I did it! I did it!" It was Jimmy. Marcy felt anger boiling to the surface. "Come on." She pulled Danny along, marching down the hall towards the sounds of celebration. Jimmy stood in front of a large ornate mirror. "Listen, you little—" Before Marcy could finish, a loud bang rang out. The decoder ring on Jimmy's hand began to glow. The boy went into a seizure. Foaming at the mouth, Jimmy fell to the floor as his body started to pulsate and twist, his bones breaking and reforming under his ever-darkening flesh. From the other rooms, screams of terror were followed by a chorus of unearthly roars. "Jimmy?" his mother asked, reaching for the hunched form of her son. He turned, snarling. Jimmy's face had become reptilian, his eyes a sparkling amber hue. The three turned to run. Jimmy pounced, catching his mother and knocking her down before ripping her to crimson shreds. Marcy grabbed Danny and barreled into the adjoining room, slamming the door shut. "The ring, it's moving, Danny cried. I can't get it off. It's fusing to my finger. Marcy barricaded the door best she could before turning her attention to her sister's plight. Her eyes darted around the room. Pencil on a desk, axe on a family crest affixed to a nearby wall. This is gonna suck really bad, okay? But the alternative is Demon Jimmy. She handed Danny the pencil. Bite down on this. Marcy took the girl's hand, laying it out on the desk. She brought the axe down, lopping off the finger with the decoder ring. The wound instantly cauterized as if a great heat was placed upon it. They sat for a while, Marcy holding her sister. Outside the room, an eerie calm had descended on the manor. Clutching the axe, Marcy slowly opened the door. The once elegant hallway was a slaughterhouse. In spite of the nightmare at hand and the chanting that filled the air, she pressed on before finally cracking open a door at the far end of the hall. Inside, the sisters stood in front of a mirror whose glass was bright red and swirling as if it were made of blood. Kneeling behind the sisters in silent reverence were the newly minted demon children. The demonic child closest to the door lifted its head and sniffed the air. It looked directly at Marcy. Oh, fuck. The demon snarled and let out a screech as it charged at Marcy. Motherfucker! Raising the axe, Marcy got ready to fight. The demon leapt at her. Swinging the axe, Marcy knocked the child out of the air with a mighty blow. Its body landed with a thud. That's right, asshole. The other children glared at her. Oh, fuck me. Behind her, the door opened. The adults that managed to survive their unholy offspring's assault issued forth, bloodied, but armed. What followed that exit was savage, quick, and completely nightmarish. But Marcy stomping Jimmy's head into the floor brought an end to the fever dream skirmish. She turned to Danny and the survivors. I call the evil Doublemint twins. Everybody out. They complied as Danny's protests faded with their departure. Marcy charged the twins, axe held high. Angelica pointed a pale finger at Marcy. Low-rent sow, you're ruining everything. Marcy swung the flat side of the axe at Angelica, knocking her into the swirling surface of the mirror. The woman howled as she was sucked into the swirling miasma. In a continuing fury, Marcy punched Bella in the stomach, sending her sprawling to the floor. She then shattered the accursed-looking glass to so much wreckage. Bella coughed, rising to her hands and knees. Marcy stood over her. She raised the axe, breathed deep, and brought it down. Hard. The manor started to rumble and shake. Marcy ran and didn't stop until she found her sister standing safely outside. They watched as the building crumbled. A figure waved to them from a second-story window. Mr. Diabli. He smiled as the building came down around him. Can we go home now? Danny asked. Yeah, Marcy rasped through a dust-laden throat. And they walked off into the night, silently. Unholy hell. All those dead kids are going to be murder for our ratings. Maybe we should go a bit lighter this time. Ooh, look how young they were there. Young and dumb. Okay, here's a hot one. A good old-fashioned doomed romance. Just the type of thing to warm your heart. In fact, the only way I think you could have your heart warmed faster would be if it was stuck on a spit atop the Devil's Grill itself. I'll call this one Kill Your Pretty Face. Poor old Victoria. It is a sad soul and a sad story to tell, but you did want to learn about my ancestors, so... Victoria's tragedy began with her wedding to a man named Reginald Williams. Why was this the start of her tragedy, you ask? Reginald was not 2 years removed from the death of his first wife, Katrina. He and Katrina had grown up together and fell madly in love, only for her to die shortly after their marriage due to illness. She was a beautiful woman, perhaps the most beautiful. It broke poor Reginald to have his young bride and lifelong friend taken from him, but he was able to heal and fall in love once more with our dear Victoria. The terrible drama of their marriage reared its ugly head when the two returned from their honeymoon and moved into the Williams family castle. You see, Reginald was not the only one fond of Katrina. His parents were as well, and always thought of them as the perfect couple. They did not, however, find much they liked about Victoria, and made no secret of it. In particular was the now spectral beauty of the former Mrs. Reginald Williams. Anytime Victoria dressed her best, or made up her hair or face to look as beautiful as possible, it wasn't enough to trump the otherworldly standard of her predecessor. This went on day after day. Soon even Reginald joined in the cruel act of comparing the two women. It drove Victoria mad. She wanted Mr. and Mrs. Williams to like her, and she especially wanted Reginald, who had fallen in love with her, to return to his more loving self. Why was she, someone who he had said was one of the most beautiful creatures he'd ever seen, considered to be no more attractive than an old shoe? Why was it that she, who dressed in the fanciest clothes, used the best makeup, and kept herself on a strict diet to keep her figure, considered ugly? Victoria had never cared before about her appearance, but now it was all she thought about. She hated being compared to someone long gone, but it was clear all the Williams wanted was another Katrina, so she decided to do something about it. Victoria started to have her hair styled like Katrina's, a change which nobody seemed to notice or wanted to acknowledge. With that not doing the trick, she moved on to having her makeup applied like Katrina would. This got a bit more attention, but was still something her husband didn't seem to react to, and her in-laws thought it made her look cheap in comparison. She then had a handmaid bring her what was left of Katrina's clothes and begun using some of Katrina's perfume as well. It was this, in combination with her earlier efforts, that garnered the most attention, especially from Reginald, who locked himself and her in their chambers for the remainder of the day. She continued this combination, but it quickly wore its welcome and left her in-laws dissatisfied with her even more, and left Reginald longing only for a ghost. One day, as Victoria was making the rounds of the castle, her handmaiden informed her that there was going to be a special meal tonight for the family, and that she was required to attend. Gloomily, Victoria spent the rest of the day preparing for the event. She didn't want to eat with her husband or in-laws, let alone even be in the same quarters with them anymore. Victoria never imagined that her life after marrying Reginald would be simply a nightmare. Perhaps, despite what consequences might come, it was time to leave it all behind. Evening came, and Victoria took her place at the great table as her in-laws and Reginald entered the room. The food was served, but before anybody could start eating, Reginald's mother stood up with her goblet in hand. She went on to explain that the meal was in honor of the deceased Katrina, as it was her birthday. Reginald and his parents took turns sharing stories of Katrina while Victoria sat in silence, barely touching her food. This fact was not lost upon the lady of the house, who scolded Victoria and punctuated the disdain by pointing out that Katrina would have never wasted food. It was the final straw for poor Victoria. She stood up from her seat, eyes ablaze and her body shaking. It is said she spoke with such venom towards her family that it would have killed a man quicker than any snakebite. She took them to task over everything the three of them had done, emphasizing the drastic changes she had made to her appearance to try to be like Katrina. Victoria called out every little critique her in-laws had made about how she didn't match the look of her predecessor. She then picked up a knife and declared that if it was Katrina they wanted, it was Katrina they would have. My poor distant relative started by slicing off parts of her ears, since it was said that Katrina had very lovely, if small, ears. In fact, most people always remembered how small Katrina's face was. So did Victoria, from how often she heard about it while being criticized. And so she continued to try and match her predecessor, all to the horrified screams of her family and the servants. After her ears, off came most of her nose. Then it was her lips, thinning them slowly and precisely with the edge of the knife. Finally, she said that all she ever wanted was to be loved by her in-laws and live a happy life with Reginald. And with that, Victoria plunged the blade into her heart and fell to the floor. All Victoria wanted was to be loved for being herself. In the end, however, all her newfound family wanted was a ghost from the past. Perhaps Victoria finally made them happy with her final act of emulating Katrina. Doesn't that just beat all? A love for the ages. Well, maybe not so much ages. But there is a dark romance to it, I suppose. Moving on. Oh, yes. Oh, look at him there. Looks so young. I mean, everybody looks young in photos, but... oh, this is a good one. A real tasty treat for you, morbid listeners. Never let it be said the family weren't true gourmands. I'll call this one The Early Bird. Salvador leaned his head against the glass of the hospital's nursery, examining the 5 babies that were displayed in the dozen or so cribs that lined the room. His eyes scanned the infants until he spotted a large, crying one in the back row. He nodded his head in approval. As he turned away, he spotted his reflection in the glass. He took a second to admire himself, with his slicked back black hair and his Sunday suit, a size too small. Looking around at the empty hospital corridors, Sal stifled a yawn. He wasn't used to getting up this early, but... as Grandma always said, the early bird eats the worm. Stretching his arms, Sal walked the couple of steps over to the door marked Nursery, Authorized Personnel Only. There was no door handle, just a key card scanner next to the door. To the right, there was an intercom mounted on the adjoining wall. Sal pushed the button next to the speaker. After a few moments, a voice crackled from the intercom. "Can I help you?" said a female voice. "I'm here to pick up a baby," Sal said. "Excuse me?" "Yeah, I want to pick up a baby. The fat one in the back'll do," Sal said, looking over at the room full of infants. "Sir, if you would, please return to the mother's room and let the nurse on duty know that you want to have the baby brought there," the voice stated. "No thanks. I'll just take it and be on my way. Please and thank you," Sal said. "Sir, per our protocols, we can only give a baby to authorized hospital personnel. Please return to the mother's room and process the request through your nurse." Sal felt his anger start to rise. "Ma'am, "Give me the baby," he said as he started pounding on the door. "Sir, please back away or I will call security," the disembodied voice said, while tinged with fear. Sal banged on the door, punctuating each word with a thunderous pounding of his fist. "Let me have the baby." "Sir, please calm down. I've called security." Sal kept pressing the intercom button, asking where his baby was. When there was no response, he turned away in frustration. While contemplating his next move, he heard the ding of an elevator down the hall. Seeing two burly security guards step out of the elevator, he quickly turned the opposite direction and began walking away. Without looking back, he turned up the next corridor, and, picking a room at random, he entered, closing the door behind him. Sal stood there quietly listening at the door for footsteps. After a moment, he heard a weak voice ask, "Is someone there?" Sal turned and looked around the room. There was a small bathroom next to the door and a sink on the opposite wall, but the majority of the room was taken up by a hospital bed surrounded by various medical equipment. A young boy, perhaps 8 years old, was struggling to lift his head to get a better view of his visitor. "Hey there, bub. What's your name?" Sal said, walking over to the bed. "William, but they call me Billy," the kid said, attempting a weak smile. "Well, Billy, nice to meet you." Sal took a closer look at the kid. "Huh. You don't look so good. I'd shake your hand, but I don't want to catch something." Billy looked confused. "Are you a doctor?" "Yeah, sure. Why not?" Sal said, walking around the bed, flicking switches on medical equipment as he walked by them. "Please forgive my shabby appearance. I left my white jacket on the golf course next to a plate of fava beans and a nice Chianti." Billy still had a confused look on his face. Staring at Sal for a few moments, he finally asked, "What's your name?" "My name?" Sal said, chuckling. "What do you think my name is? Take a good look and try to read my mind." Sal leaned over Billy, staring him in the eyes intently. The last doctor in here was Dr. Rodney," Billy trailed off. "Well, goddamn! That's my name too! Son of a bitch! You must be psychic!" Sal exclaimed. "You don't act like a doctor," Billy said with an air of suspicion. "Yeah, people say that to me a lot. The thing is that I tell people the truth. Those other doctors, you can't trust them. All they want to do is keep you sick so they can get more of your money. I have butt tons of money, so I do this shit for free," Sal finished with a nod. "He was nice to me," Billy protested. "Yeah, they do that, so you'll trust them, and then they get you. Never trust a smiling man," Sal said, with a grin. He began walking around the room again, eyeing all of the various pieces of equipment. Billy still looked confused. Sal continued. "So, Billy boy, what's wrong with you? Got a case of the bends? The drip, drip, drip of gonorrhea? Maybe a matchbox car stuck up the old poop chute?"
Well, they said I have something wrong in my belly. It might be cancer, they said," Billy said in a whisper.
"Well, doesn't that just bite a big old dick? Does it hurt bad?" Sal said, taking a few steps forward to stand next to the kid.
"Yeah," he said softly. "Sometimes it hurts so bad that I just have to lay here and cry."
"Wow, kid, that sucks. Where does it hurt?" Sal said, pushing his fingers into various spots on Billy's abdomen. Billy screamed and began crying when Sal touched him. You got a bad case, but don't worry. I think I can take care of it," Sal said. Billy wiped his tears.
"Really? You can really make it stop hurting?"
"Kid, I guarantee it," Sal said, flipping open a switchblade knife. There was no one in the hall outside Billy's room to hear his muffled screams when Sal began making an incision along the right side of his stomach. Billy began writhing on the bed, kicking and flinging his arms wildly to get away from the pain. It took all of Sal's strength to pin him down with his left arm while he completed the incision with his right. Damn it, kid. If you keep jumping around like that, you're gonna hurt yourself, Sal grunted. Sal enlarged the cut and slid his hand into Billy's abdomen. Blood ran down Sal's arm as he rooted around, searching with his fingers. Billy finally stopped moving as he passed out from all the pain. Sal began smiling as his hand found what he was looking for. He strained with effort as he tried to pull his arm out of Billy's body. Finally, something snapped, and his hand popped out, along with a river of blood. Sal's smile broadened into a grin as he held up a bit of flesh, like a prize. He reverently laid it on Billy's food tray and reached his hand back inside for more. 10 minutes later, Dr. Jameson walked down the hall, trying to juggle a hot cup of coffee and an electronic tablet. The hospital was just beginning to wake up, and he, as normal, loved getting an early start on his rounds. He stopped in front of Billy's door and reviewed his chart, using a finger from the hand holding the coffee to flip between the pages. Looking at the latest test results, he sighed and shook his head. Taking a deep breath, Dr. Jameson forced a smile on his face and entered the room. As the door started to swing shut, the doctor began to scream, first from shock, and then from pain. The screams echoed through the halls along with the laughter of a madman. Once again, Sal approached the nursery door, smoothing out the white lab coat he was now wearing. Footsteps reverberated throughout the hallways as people ran around, trying to find the source of the screams heard a few minutes earlier. Sal pulled an ID card out of the pocket of the jacket and looked again at the name. Dr. Rodney Jameson. Sal chuckled. Taking a quick look to make sure the fat baby was still in his crib, Sal ran the ID card across the sensor next to the door. There was a buzz and a click as the door began to open. Sal grinned widely, pleased that he would be able to leave with a baby. There was no way he would disappoint Grandma. When she said bring a dessert for family dinner, you damn well better bring a dessert and do it as quickly as possible. After all, the early bird eats the worm. Well, that dessert will surely stick to your ribs. How can we ever top that? Let's see. This one's good. Okay. How about a tale of hard work really paying off? I mean, that's a morality play any freaky family can get behind. I'll call this one The Scientist. I can explain. I pissed myself before you got there. I don't know exactly how long before, but it felt like I was standing there for hours, shaking in my cold, wet pants. It's important that you understand that. I just don't want you thinking that what terrified me so much was you two. Neither of you are even slightly intimidating, okay? The rest is less important. I have trouble holding down a job because, honestly, people have a problem dealing with me. Over the years, I've been blacklisted from most customer service positions in the area. Now that there's not much left, I've been working an assortment of the shittiest low-level jobs anyone can imagine. No one respects me. I don't even respect me anymore. That's why I was so thrilled about the cemetery gig. My buddy, Jose, is really good friends with the guy who runs Lakeview Cemetery. He told me they were looking for a night watchman after the last one had died under, mysterious circumstances. Either that, or the guy was fired. I wasn't actually paying that much attention. The point is, Jose told him about me, and after a really informal interview, I was hired. Mr. Albertson seemed like a good dude, like he really wanted to help me out, so yeah, I feel really bad about this. Anyway, I was a little nervous that first night. I figured I might have to deal with ghosts and disembodied voices or something, but it turns out cemeteries aren't actually that creepy at night. In reality, it was very quiet and, honestly, pleasant there after hours. The grounds were also located in a wealthy suburban enclave, so even though I was there to apprehend and deter trespassers, there just weren't any. Every night for the first month was basically a copy of the one before. Get in at 8 p.m., make my first hourly walk of the grounds, go back to the office, and watch the security cameras while simultaneously watching shit on the internet. Then make my second round, and on in that fashion until 5 a.m. when I locked up and went home. It was a peaceful life. For a while. It was exactly 1 month and 2 days in, I started seeing the shadow. I was listening to a Ghost Stories podcast and mindlessly scrolling through social media when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement on one of the gate cams. By the time I looked straight at it, whatever it was gone. I knew the podcast had put me on edge, so I thought I was just scaring myself. It was probably just an opossum. But it kept happening. Another 3 times that night. And then the next night. And the next one too. Whenever I'd go out to investigate everything, it was quiet. By night 4, I was more annoyed than creeped out. As much as I didn't want to, I decided I would keep my full attention on the cameras all night and finally catch that fucker. And let me tell you, it was the most boring night of my goddamned life. By 2 a.m., my body was feeling heavy and I was fighting to stay awake. Every few minutes, the inertia of my shoulders giving in to gravity shocked me back to consciousness. Until it didn't, and I bashed my head against the edge of my computer. That was enough to wake me up for good. I ran to the bathroom to check how badly my head was bleeding. A lot. It was bleeding a lot, and I bandaged it up. When I stepped back into view of the monitors, I finally saw it. There was someone climbing down the chain link fence with a shovel. Cool, I thought. It was finally time to do my job. I rushed up the hill towards the area of the cemetery where the intruder had entered. The moon fully illuminated the muggy pre-dawn. It glinted off of something at the top. I stopped short when I realized what I was seeing. A woman. A really gorgeous, petite, raven-haired woman was digging. I panicked. I just realized I didn't know what I was supposed to do in this situation. Ask her to leave? Call the cops? Ask her out to dinner? Yeah, the last one. No, I had a job to do, I reminded myself. This is a criminal, a grave robber. A beautiful, perfect grave robber. I was having this internal battle for so long that she noticed me. Well, she began. I jumped at the break in the silence. Which one did you choose? Her sapphire eyes sparkled at me. What? Are you turning me into the pigs? Or are you going to help? I was aware at this point that my brain had stopped working. Why was she being so calm about this? Why was I getting so flustered? I work here, but I guess I can help, I finally managed. What? No. Oh, good. My preferred option. She smiled. Here, I even brought an extra shovel, just in case. In case of what? Before I could think much more on anything, we were both working to unearth a grave. So, what are we doing exactly? I asked, finally breaking the tense silence that I'd created. There's something in here that's mine. It's important, and I need to get it back. Oh, so, sort of like digging through the trash because you dropped your wallet in there? She laughed. Basically. Her sweat-drenched clothes clung to her, revealing all of her curves. It must be really important if you're willing to dig someone up over it, My shovel thudded as it graced the lid of the coffin. "It's time," she exclaimed like a child about to see their favorite TV show. She motioned me to get out of the trench as she finished the last of the work on her own. I peered down as she brushed the dirt from the top of the coffin. "We're really doing this, huh?" "Ever seen a dead body?" She smirked and lifted the lid before I had time to respond. It's not that I'd never seen a dead body. I'd actually been keeping my soda cool next to one in the morgue. I'd just never seen one in that stage of decay before. Overcome with nausea, I turned away and vomited as quietly as possible. I could hear her giggling at me as I spit into the grass. "It's okay. You'll get used to it." She gasped in full-on laughter when she saw how red I was. I just wasn't prepared," I grumbled, looking back into the pit, just in time to see her pop this poor bastard's shoulder from its socket and tear his arm like a chicken drumstick. This time, I was unable to control the volume of my retching. I heard her crawl out of the grave from behind me. "Oh, poor baby. It's okay," she said as she sat down next to me, as I wiped the vomit from my face, and she stroked my back gently with the severed arm. I jumped back. "What the fuck are you doing with that? I thought you were getting something out there, not..." "This is it." She stared at me with this look of confusion that I didn't understand. "Did you think I was after jewelry or something?" "Yes." "Well, that's a little sexist, don't you think?" "What?" She began, motioning to herself with the dead arm, "am a scientist, and this arm is essential to my work." Work? It's going to be a major revelation for the medical community and, really, society in general. I just need a few last pieces to complete it now. You know, just some odds and ends. "So, what is your work then?" She leaned in and whispered in my ear. "It's a secret." Shit. I was so turned on and creeped out at the same time. "But you can see it when it's done, if you want. You've already been a big help. Any chance you'd want to help me gather the last bits I need?" Please understand that I wouldn't have normally said yes, but I thought I might get something out of this. I'm sure you'd understand if you saw her. And come on, a lot of people we dismembered were probably organ donors anyway. I'm sure they would love to hear that a little more of them was going to science. So, for the next week, I had a new normal. Mess around until 2 a.m., then meet her at the side of the gate so we could begin the second act of the evening. Digging up bodies. It was a lot of work, but just being around her made it worth it. I felt like the luckiest grave robber in the world. 7 days later, we were sitting in the dewy grass trying to catch our breath after refilling a grave as she examined the arm we had just excavated. "This is it. The prologue is over," she exclaimed, embracing the arm. "So, I squeaked as she suddenly pulled me in and kissed me softly. I pulled back. I'm not going to say it wasn't a great kiss or that the entire world didn't melt away with her embrace, but the severed arm in between us made me not want to linger. "Hey, how about we go get breakfast after my shift and celebrate?" She shook her head. "I have a better idea. I think it's time I show you what I've been working on." Her voice rose in excitement. "You can help me finish it, okay?" Me? Okay. Maybe then breakfast? She took my hand and pulled me forward. Wait, I'm still on the clock. If I leave, I'll lose my job." "We're not leaving." She stopped short in front of a mausoleum. She turned back to me. "Open it." I was beginning to feel like I'd made a mistake. I froze up, sweat dripping into my eyes. "I actually don't think I'm the right person to help you. I'm not good at science-y stuff. Let's just go get breakfast, okay?" "Are you scared?" She chuckled, placed her hand over mine, and pushed my palm onto the door handle. "Here, we'll do it together." Click. I was shaking as the door began to swing away from the jamb. The cool, humid darkness brushed my face as I stared into that pitch blackness. As she pushed me forward, I realized she was much stronger than her frame let on. The door closed behind us. Her hand slid into my pocket, retrieving my flashlight. "Go ahead," she coaxed. Numbly, I pressed my thumb against the on button and slid it forward. I squinted, waiting for my eyes to adjust, but kind of hoping they wouldn't. I began to see the shape of a person in front of us. No, not a person. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I let out a gasp. "It's beautiful, right?" Her cheer made me nauseous. "What?" That was the only word I could find. "It's me, silly. That's me." No. She was standing behind me, breathing into my ear. What was in front of us was an amalgamation of the dead. Many different decomposing limbs stitched onto a skeletal torso. They were arranged in a nonsensical yet horrific fashion by someone who either didn't understand anatomy or wasn't trying to. 7 arms stretched out from the sides, a rotting head sat on top, hair matted and dark, flesh melting away from its skull, its eye sockets vacant. You just have to sew on this last arm, and it's done. Then we make a tiny cut on your wrist, and I can come back," she coaxed, giving me a literal hand. Why was she trying to make a monster? Realizing my response was to freeze up, she embraced me. This is when I pissed myself. "It's okay. Whenever you're ready," she said as she stroked my hair. I couldn't recognize her voice anymore. This chick was going to kill me if I didn't finish whatever this was, I thought. I had to do something to get away, but I couldn't. I just let her run her hands through my hair and waited for death. You know the rest, I think. You have no idea how grateful I am you two busted in then. I guess all the freshly dug up graves were a dead giveaway, pardon the pun. I'm not saying I didn't help, I'm just saying that you've missed something on the cameras. I didn't make that. I mean, I don't even know how to sew, and why would I? Listen, just check them again. She was there. She was definitely there. I can't tell you how many fun stories came from that old family business. Cemeteries really just kind of run themselves, so we've been in the business for a really long time. But that time, they kind of went astray. So let's end with a real crowd pleaser. That hoary old chestnut of exploiting addiction. Just a little bit further in. Found it. That's a great picture, by the way. Look at their hair. Sorry, I always look at people's hair when I look at the past, because I feel like you tell so much. Did Grandpa have a duck butt? Was Grandpa a greaser? Anyway, sorry, I got too excited. But I found what I was looking for. This is a story I'm proud of. A tale of the family becoming all in on sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, okay, make that disco, but the rest holds true. I'll simply call this one Pharaoh. I awoke after a decade-long slumber in my palatial bedroom within the confines of my ancestral home. While I had closed my eyes in the late 1960s and opened them in the late 1970s, my surroundings were decidedly rooted in the Victorian age, and so that age's aesthetic admiration became an easy gateway into the decadence I would soon find myself nearly drowning in. Did I mention the various dead birds scattered throughout the room? Probably not. Long slumber makes me ever so absent-minded. Anyhow, the birds, they come here to die, and as they do, they whisper their secrets to me. what they've seen and heard of the teeming masses of humanity that crawl below them like mere ants under the gaze of a dreaming god. With such necromancy, I've learned the prevalence of dance halls, discotheques, and the debauchery contained between their wicked walls. This, I believed, would be just what my weary soul needed to properly awaken. I remember the first time I stepped within a disco. Hundreds of bodies pressed together, movements syncopated to the driving drums and bass of each heavily manufactured piece of ear-pleasing. If bereft of any real soul or life, it was still a musical concoction. The cockroaches lying headless between the walls and the vomit and piss-drowned flies spoke louder than the music, however. And the things they said, the things they had seen, would cause any more fragile soul to wilt and die immediately upon the space they occupied from hearing the revelations. Naturally, I was deeply interested in hearing and experiencing more. And in the weeks to come, I did just that, with every man or woman in the room, as what lies under a person's garments pales to what they can offer me, what I can take from them. And of the taking, I took their essence, which, combined with the stimulants in their system and the stench of sex on their bodies, provided me with enough of a kick to help keep me as porcelain for at least half a decade to come. But as always, I craved more. After some study, I deduced that the weak link were the drugs, third-rate materials sold for premium prices, third-rate where magics were concerned anyway. I spent days scouring my arcane tomes for an idea on how to make their situation worse. As I began to believe my search would bear no fruit, I stumbled across the answer as if by fate. The solution lay deep below the sands off far-off Egypt, and deep below the now time-ruined fabric that wrapped the pharaohs tight in their tombs. But that ancient land, and those sepulchres had no easy access, and the lines around my eyes were ever deepening. That's when a friend, a beloved avian friend, collided with the window of my study. I held the creature until the light faded from his eyes, and then, as if by habit, I read his secrets. And that's when I learned of an exhibit of interest arriving at a museum in the very same metropolis I had so recently tried to quench my dark thirst. To say the procurement of mummy phallus was fraught with danger and daring do would be a more exciting tale, but alas, it would be an untruth. Rather, it had more to do with a large bank account and a lack of security cameras. Once home, I began my alchemical deviltry, grinding that ancient manhood within a mortar and pestle made from the bones of a mystic from the farthest Nepal. After adding various fluids, my own and those liberated from others, and drying the compound under intense heat from lamps meant to duplicate the sun of the great desert itself, I had my prize. Pharaoh, the latest rage in designer drugs. Ah, the times. The times. As I'd become a known commodity on the scene, it was easy to get the usuals to try my new confection. And with flaring nostrils and hedonistic hearts, my thralls fed their nervous system a banquet of pure pyramid power sex magic. I smiled as I felt the true pulse of the decade, a pulse that beat to a rhythm of my choosing. As the drug took hold, all around me fell into an orgy the likes of which hadn't been witnessed since Caligula held sway in old Rome. The debauchery became ever more depraved, and soon I was surrounded by a near insurmountable wall of pulsating, feverishly rutting men and women combined in every configuration the human body can muster. And then in ways it was never meant to. I sipped my Cabernet Sauvignon and sniffed the fetid air. The ocean of fucking flowed on around me, seemingly for an eternity, until I procured a vial from my waistcoat and bent low. The floor was covered in a slick layer of rapidly expanding bodily fluids. I removed the cork stopper from the vessel and gathered nearly half a vial of that elixir, my very lifeblood. I stood examining my prize in the swirling lumescence of the large mirrored ball that spun crazily above the dance floor, turned Dionysian pleasure dome. I admit to releasing a peal or two of rather joyful laughter at the thought of another decade or two of slumber and an even longer period of extended youthfulness. The lily would be gilded once more. Did a dog just bark? There it was again, that bizarre canine cacophony, coming somewhere from the quickly exhausting swarm. The air was suddenly filled with the sound of wet tearing, as if someone were shredding the flesh of a sweating pig like a sheet of thin paper. It rang out again and again, punctuated here and there by that infernal barking and the occasional orgasmic moan. The throng stopped all movement. Then, all light was extinguished. A light hum filled the room, and the various exit signs around the club lit up once more. But only them. The room was bathed in crimson, surrounded by thick, impenetrable shadows. The bodies around me convulsed. Darkness for a heartbeat, then that infernal red light once more. The revelers stood in unison, no easy feat considering the way most were still commingled. I gave pause when I saw their faces, their heads. Before I could fully process that which my eyes had seen, illumination abandoned me again. A sound, a guttural growl followed by 100 feral howls surrounded me. All lights returned to life at once, and that's when I saw it. A tangled tumor populated by constantly lactating breasts, ejaculating phalluses, and horribly quivering vaginal openings. To say nothing of the various gasping anuses that released thick pink tongues studded by rows of mean obsidian thorns. Atop this unfortunate calamity, there snapped and frothed dozens of midnight black jackal heads, and the whole thing was covered in weeping wounds that formed obscene hieroglyphs. My word, I whispered, trying to deduce just where my measurements may have gone wrong. The beast said something in Egyptian tongue that you can just bet was neither pleasant or complimentary to my person. With a spryness, I dashed to the bottle-festooned shelves of the bar behind me. I smashed an endless array of rainbow-hued glass vessels, their fermented contents soaking the immediate area. I made for the nearest exit, dodging various fluids, appendages, and ancient curses in equal measure. And when I'd finally made it to one of those glowing signs of egress, I laughed triumphantly, cast a simple spark glamour, and set the room ablaze. And with it, Anubis reincarnated, who became a flame-robed manifestation of exquisite, smoldering death. Fitting indeed. I strolled into the crisp night air as the sounds of sirens grew ever louder. Once in my chambers, house lights dimmed, I partook of the contents of the vial. Recipe be damned. I stared into my looking-glass and exhaled contentedly, as the various wrinkles and blemishes that had plagued my flesh abated once more. I locked all of the doors and windows of my manse, drew heavy curtains closed, and settled into my bed, the ever-increasing sirens faintly filling the air from across the river providing my lullaby. I closed my eyes, dreams of the coming decade's vices filling my mind, as slumber finally took me. Well, that ended the only way it possibly could. Poorly. At least for those poor souls touched by my family's evil desires. I think that's enough of that terror tome for a
good time to come. Let's just make like the fabulous Thunderbirds and wrap it up, shall we? I appreciate you all sitting down and listening to a little taste of my family history. And I also want to say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how incredible it is. 100 episodes in 100 weeks with you guys. Scary stories, frightening moments, and incredibly talented authors. Thank you all so much. And if you love this show as much as I love doing it, please go to WeeklySpooky.com and throw us just a little bit of support. Whether it's the tip jar or becoming a patron on Patreon and helping us make another 100 episodes to come. But until next time, I suppose you're safe. Trust me. A gargantuan thank you to our Patreon backers who have allowed us to keep going and going for over now 100 episodes. And a huge extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, Gino Lyons, Michael aka Sharm, Karen Weemet, Jeff and George Hilton, Craig Cohen, Rob Fields, and Kevin Fry. Thank you all so much. I can't tell you what it means to me, having this dream to tell scary stories every single week, and having so many talented people join me for the ride, and so many wonderful and dedicated people listening every single week. It's an absolute dream, and I can't thank you enough. It was worth doing 100 weeks in a row without a single week off, I assure you. Weekly Spooky is performed by Henrique Couto. Music and sound design has been created by Ray Mattis. Produced by Dan Wilder. Tonight's special stories were Magic Mansion by Shane Migliavacca, Kill Your Pretty Face by Morgan Moore, The Early Bird by Keith Tomlin, The Scientist by Michelle Adler, and Pharaoh by Dan Wilder. Please come back next week, because we're not stopping. There are plenty more scares coming your way, including 5 Halloween-themed stories for the month of October.